Snow drifted across the empty platform like white ghosts, swirling under the dim lanterns of the old Pine Hollow station. It was Christmas Eve, the night when families gathered near fires and warmth. But for Amelia Hart, the town's quiet seamstress, there was no laughter waiting for her. She sat alone on the cold wooden bench, wrapped in her red shawl, her breath fogging heavily in the frozen air. Hours earlier, she had sewn her final dress for the wealthiest family in town, hoping to receive the payment she desperately needed to board the last train home. But the payment never came. They had forgotten, they said. And by the time she reached her tiny boarding room to gather her things, her roommate had locked her out and tossed her suitcase into the snow. With only a handful of coins in her pocket and nowhere else to go, Amelia had hurried to the station hoping the conductor might allow her to stand in the back of the carriage. But the trainmaster only shook his head. Ticket or no ride. Now she sat with her shawl pulled tight, the icy wind slicing through the thin fabric of her dress. The station's old clock struck midnight, its deep chime echoing across the deserted tracks. Every sound grew sharper, the crackle of ice forming on the bench, the distant howl of a winter gust, the creak of the station roof settling under the weight of fresh snow. She closed her eyes, praying she wouldn't freeze before daylight came. Memories burned in her mind, her mother teaching her to sew tiny dresses from scrap fabric, the warm kitchen that smelled of cinnamon, and the sound of carols drifting from the radio on Christmas Eve. All of that felt like another lifetime. Since her mother's death, the world had shown Amelia kindness only in rare, fragile moments. She had thought coming to Pine Hollow would give her a fresh start, a small sewing job, a clean room, a chance to build a life from nothing. But instead, she found exploitation, loneliness, and a town where winter seemed to swallow hope. Her fingers trembled as she held the tiny silver thimble her mother had given her, the only possession she had managed to save. "You'll never be alone as long as you can stitch something new," her mother used to say. But tonight, with frost biting her skin and snow soaking her shoes, Amelia could barely hold on to that belief. The lantern beside her flickered, almost going out before catching flame again, casting soft gold against the dark blue night. Amelia leaned toward it, embracing its weak warmth. She pulled her knees close and rested her head on her shawl. "Just a few minutes," she whispered to herself, letting her eyes close. But minutes turned into drifting thoughts, and drifting thoughts into heavy, dreamlike stillness. The world around her faded into white silence. And then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the deep snow. Amelia's eyes fluttered open. A tall shadow moved near the side of the platform. Her heart jumped. She held her breath, unsure whether to call out or pretend she slept. The figure stepped into the lantern's glow, and she saw him clearly. A man dressed in traditional Apache clothing, layered for winter, his braided hair dusted with snow, his dark eyes sharp yet calm. His presence was powerful, quiet, grounded, like someone who belonged to the land more than the town. He studied her with an unreadable expression. "You will freeze if you stay here," he said, his voice deep and steady. Amelia swallowed hard, unable to speak at first. No one had spoken to her kindly all day. I'm waiting for the next train," she whispered, even though she already knew none would come until morning. He looked toward the tracks, then back at her. "There is no next train tonight." She lowered her gaze, ashamed of how helpless she must look, a woman alone, shivering, clinging to a fading lantern. The Apache man approached slowly, as if not wanting to frighten her. "Why are you out here?" he asked. Her lips trembled as she answered, "I have nowhere else to go." Something softened in his eyes, a flicker of understanding. He reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy buffalo hide blanket. Without asking, he draped it gently over her shoulders. The warmth was instant and overwhelming. Amelia blinked, stunned by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. The man nodded once. "My name is Cale." She hesitated, then replied, "Amelia." Cale looked at the station around them, the platform buried in snow, the distant mountains dark against the cloudy sky, the ghostly steam from the last train drifting up into the heavens. "You cannot stay out here alone," he said. "Not in this cold. It kills quickly." Amelia wanted to stand, to gather herself, to prove she was stronger than she looked. But her legs would not move. Cale noticed. Without hesitation, he stepped closer and extended his hand. "Come," he said simply. "I will help you." And that was the moment. The moment. That would change everything. Christmas Eve, the seamstress alone on a frozen platform, and the Apache warrior who found her before the cold could claim her. Her story was no longer hers alone. Kyle lifted Amelia with surprising gentleness, supporting her as if she were weightless despite the exhaustion in her bones. The warmth from the blanket seeped deeper into her body as he guided her away from the station. Snow crunched loudly under their boots, the sound echoing in the silent night. Amelia had never been this close to an Apache before. Most of Pine Hollow eyed natives with suspicion or fear, fueled by prejudice that she herself never understood. Yet Cale's presence was steady and protective, far safer than any citizen who had turned her away earlier that day. They moved slowly through the snowy town until they reached the edge where buildings gave way to forest. A small cabin stood tucked beneath tall pines, its windows glowing faintly with firelight. Cale opened the door with one swift push, and warm air washed over Amelia's frozen skin. The cabin was simple, a stone fireplace crackling with life, a wooden table, a woven rug, a makeshift bed covered in thick blankets. Everything in the room spoke of practicality and survival, yet also of care. Cale helped her sit near the fire and placed a tin cup of warm broth in her hands. Steam rose from the cup, fogging her eyes. She hadn't eaten since morning. She drank slowly, savoring each swallow. Cale sat across from her, observing without pressing her to speak. "You work with needles," he said, nodding toward her dress. "Your hands are skilled." Amelia looked down at her sore, half-frozen fingers. "I'm a seamstress," she said quietly. "I make dresses, mend uniforms, whatever people need." Kyle considered that for a moment. "A useful craft. My mother taught me how to weave patterns, but I never had the patience for fine stitches." Amelia smiled faintly, the first true smile she had made in days. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Gradually her voice found strength. She told Kyle about the family who refused to pay her, the locked boarding room, the conductor who turned her away, and the snowstorm that trapped her at the station. With each detail she spoke aloud. She realized how cruelly simple her downfall had been, how a handful of heartless decisions had almost cost her her life. Cale listened quietly, his eyes darkening with something like anger on her behalf. "People forget kindness," he said, "but winter does not forgive forgetfulness." His words were calm, but heavy with truth. Amelia watched the fire dance across the walls. "Why were you near the station?" she asked gently. Cale leaned back. "I was returning from delivering medicine to a sick elder in town. I saw the lantern burning beside you. You looked like someone the night was trying to claim." Amelia shivered, not from cold, but from the thought of what might have happened had he not been there. Hours passed, and the storm outside grew fiercer, wind rattling the windows like claws. Cale prepared a place for her to rest, layering blankets to trap heat. Amelia hesitated. "I don't want to trouble you." He shook his head firmly. "Saving someone is never trouble." She lay down, sinking into the warmth. Cale sat near the fire, keeping watch. She spoke softly. "Kyle, why help a stranger?" He met her gaze. "No one should face the winter alone." Amelia fell asleep to the sound of wind outside and the steady crackle of fire. By morning the storm had softened. Amelia woke wrapped in warmth so deep it felt unreal. Cale was outside splitting wood, his breath fogging in the cold dawn. She stepped out quietly, wrapped in the buffalo blanket. "You didn't sleep?" she asked. He gave a small smile. "I rested when the storm did." They shared a simple breakfast, and for the first time in months Amelia felt safe and seen. The world beyond the cabin seemed distant and unimportant. Cale handed her a pair of warm moccasins he had kept stored away. "These will fit," he said. "They were my sister's." Amelia hesitated. "I can't take these." Cale gently placed them in her hands. "Your feet are bruised from the cold. Let them heal." As she sat by the fire once more, a sudden realization washed over her. Pine Hollow had given her nothing but hardship, yet this stranger had shown her more compassion in one night than the entire town had in months. "Cale," she said softly, "what happens now?" He paused in his work, then looked at her with steady resolve. "You can stay here until you decide your path. You owe me nothing, but winter is long, and you should not face it alone." For the first time since her mother's passing, Amelia felt the fragile warmth of belonging. Outside, the storm clouds parted, letting sunlight touch the snow like scattered diamonds. Amelia stepped outside, breathing deeply. She wasn't abandoned anymore. She wasn't forgotten. She had been found, on the coldest night, in the loneliest hour, by someone who saw her worth when others didn't, and maybe, just maybe, this unexpected meeting would stitch together a new life, thread by thread.